All right. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. This is Fish On, the webcast where we talk fishing. Really excited today. I got my first two guests on, Tim Myers and Deirdre Green. We're going to talk fly fishing, maybe tell some fishing stories, and they're going to talk about their web series Flow that they're currently filming and working on. So I thought before I brought them on, I would address a few things from last week's show. I had some people asking me questions about the soft plastics and the weedless setups that I was kind of talking about for chain pickerel and smallmouth bass. So I thought it'd be a good idea to kind of show how they're rigged up. So anyway, basically what I was talking about are baits like this. This one here is a swim bait. Some people call them paddle tails. And these are the hooks you're going to want to use. I'll show you right here. Okay, it's called a wide gap hook. And the size I prefer are your 3/0 and 4/0. Okay, you can use any kind of brand you want as long as they're those offset hooks. So basically, what you're going to do is take your bait and you're going to put the point of it, you're going to aim it down towards the belly of the bait, just about 1 centimeter, and come out right there. And then you're going to continue to thread it right up to the eye, and then you're going to twist the hook so that it's pointing kind of into the belly of the bait. Now, a little tip, you're going to measure kind of where the hook should go in. I kind of put my finger there to measure where it goes in. You're going to stick it under the belly of the bait right through the back. And everything should sit flush. And now if you look, the hook point isn't really exposed. So when you're fishing through the weed and heavy cover, that will swim and paddle its tail through all the cover. I like to try to keep my rod tip up so that it's on top. And those fish are sitting there and they'll come out charging at it. And you should stay fairly weedless with that. If you're using like a steel lead or something, sometimes it'll catch a little bit of weed, but for the most part, it's pretty good. Now, that's one style of bait you can use. There's a couple styles that I like. So the second one I like, and really popular with a lot of smallmouth bass and chain pickerel fishermen, I've even caught striped bass on these, is your fluke style or minnow style. And you rig it the same way. You take your hook, insert it about 1 centimeter, pull it out the bottom, push it all the way basically to the eye of the hook, rotate it, measure where it's going to go, up through the belly, and make sure it's flat. You want everything flat and straight. Sometimes if you go too much, you'll kind of have this look to it, where it looks like its back is broken. You don't want that. That's going to affect the motion of the bait. So you really want to kind of measure where it should go, stick it in, make sure it's nice and flat. Sometimes what you can do too, I don't know if you can see that there, you just kind of stick the point back into the bait a little bit, and that's weedless there. So when a fish actually hits this, the hook will expose itself, and that's how you get the hook into the fish. But just running it through the weeds and stuff, you won't. And it'll actually bounce over rocks, even some wood and logs. So that's the second bait. That's a fluke style bait. Then the really popular, some people refer to them as Senkos or stick baits. It's basically a plastic worm. And again, same thing. Put it in the point, about 1 centimeter through, thread it to the eye, measure where it should go in, and keep it nice and flat. Okay, same thing. And all of those baits can be fished on top of the weed cover. Okay, you just skip it across the top, maybe let it pause if you see like a pocket in the weed, or if you get like a weed edge, you can kind of let it sink down on that weed edge. And the last one that I like is kind of like your frog style. So it's got two little legs and they'll kick, and you rig it the exact same way. I'll show it one more time. right out the bottom, thread it right to the eye, twist the hook around, and insert it in the belly, and there you have it. All right, and this is another style of hook I'm going to show you. If you're looking to fish a little bit deeper, if you see like a deeper weed edge, without a weight on it, those don't sink very fast. It's more for like kind of like your top water or just under the surface. If you're looking for something a little deeper, you can get yourself some of these. Now these come unweighted as well, but I like these weighted ones when I want to go deep. And it's a little different. It's got you see there's a screw on it. So basically for this, you'll just take your bait and you'll screw that screw right into it. Oh, if I can get it in there. Screw it right in. And then same thing. The hook's you're gonna measure where it should go on the underside of the bait. Up and through. And we'll sit there like that. Now this bait will sink a little bit faster, and it will actually, because the weight's in the middle, it'll actually sink straight down instead of nose first. And this is really good if you're out fishing and you see like a submerged weed bed, maybe 5 feet under the surface, and you know your regular ones without the weights aren't getting down. This is a great option. These swim bait hooks is what they're called. And the last essential part, if you're after chain pickerel, I mentioned these two the other day, are your titanium wire leaders. So you can see how thin this is compared to like your regular steel woven leaders. This is just one strand of titanium. I think this one is 14 pound, I think. I use 14 or 18 pound usually. And the nice thing about titanium leaders, you can bend them all up and they snap right back in place. If I did this with a regular steel woven leader and just wrapped it around my finger like that, it would stay like that, and that will affect the action. So these are really good. They're very thin, so they don't affect the action of the lure too much. Those big steel woven leaders can really affect the action of lures. And I use these for fly fishing too, if you're into fly fishing for toothy fish. And it doesn't have to be pickerel. If you're down somewhere in the warmer waters, let's say, and you're fishing like barracuda or something like that, these will work fine too. And they're really light. You can cast them pretty easy. I really don't notice much of a difference with these on it. So grab some of this stuff. This is the brand I use. I tie my own. They actually have pre-made ones, but I just buy the wire and kind of get some crimps and all my swivels and stuff and tie my own. And if you're interested in doing that, you can kind of see there. Let me see. I got a crimp, my snap swivel on the end, and a barrel swivel. I use crimps with these, but this wire is actually knottable. You can actually tie certain knots with it, so you don't even need crimps. All right. All right. So I am going to bring on Tim and Deirdre right now. I'm really excited to have them. Friends of mine fish with Tim a lot. We actually fished today on the Stewiacke River. It was an epic day. It was awesome. I'm going to bring them on. They're going to kind of talk about different fly fishing and share some stories. And they've got crazy experience, and it's going to be awesome. So I'm going to bring them in here right now. Here we go. Welcome, Tim Myers, and welcome, Deirdre. How are you guys doing?
Good, man.
Good. How are you?
Good. I'm great. So I thought we'd start maybe by just getting you guys to just kind of introduce yourselves and kind of talk about yourselves, what you do, how you got into maybe fishing or fly fishing. So I don't know if Tim, you want to start and just kind of. Sure. Tim, if you didn't know, is a professional photographer. Maybe you can kind of tell us about that and how long you've been doing it. And
yeah, we can kind of talk about like, you know, fishing and my professional life kind of started on different paths and converged. So I started fishing like everybody else. I had friends who fished and my family fished, and my father was a conservation officer. So we spent a lot of time for, in the outdoors, and you know, I definitely took away his respect for the outdoors, and it motivates me all the time. And as far as professional goes, you know, I've always been into photography and videography, but I started professionally my career here over 20 years ago at CBC, and worked for a long time in network sports after that. And my network sports job was in Toronto, and I hated living in a city that large. It just wasn't for me. So I really came back to fishing as something to do to get away from that life. And it kind of evolved into me quitting my job in network sports and kind of combining these two things. And when I first did it, everybody thought I was absolutely crazy, and I haven't looked back, and I wouldn't change anything.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you did. And anyone who's followed your work or has seen your stuff, I think they're pretty glad you did as well. Yeah, great. Deirdre, you wanna go ahead?
Sure. So fishing for myself is fairly new. I would still consider myself to be more of a beginner compared to many in the province. But my fiance Derek, he had grown up fishing, fly fishing specifically. Big time salmon angler, trout angler in the province. Grew up fishing the St. Mary's. And when I met him in 2015, it just was part of his lifestyle, and it quickly became part of our first dates, and some of our friends got into it, or my friends came along with me and got into it after the fact, and it was just a fun recreational pursuit at the beginning. But I've always loved being outdoors, and I've always loved kind of looking at different wildflowers and remembering the names from going on walks with my mom growing up in the valley. And so fly fishing kind of encompasses everything that I love about being outdoors. You always get to take time to stop and see different wildlife and different plant life and trees, and then at the end of it you reach a really amazing destination and hopefully hook up with some beautiful wild fish. So it pretty quickly was something that I was passionate about and became obsessed about.
Awesome. So where did you guys kind of start fishing? Like, what's like your first memory of fishing? What area was it? What were you targeting? Like, you know, I don't know if you guys started out like many of us spin fishing. I just got into fly fishing. Not, you know, I've been spin fishing way longer. I don't know if you guys want to speak to that. Like, where did you guys kind of start? Like, how did it all start for you? What's your earliest memories?
Do you want me to go first?
Sure, yeah.
For me, it's fishing stocked fish with my dad with spinning gear. You know, throwing corn in the water and catching stocked fish to take them home to eat.
Yeah,
that's really it for me. It was like I didn't know bass existed in the province till I was in high school. It was all trout.
All trout. Yeah. No, that's about the same as me. My dad took me to one. It was you fish ponds or pay to fish ponds, whatever you want to call them. I think it was like 5. And you know, great way to get kids started, but started to get too good at it, got too expensive for them, so we had to branch out into more wild fish. Yeah. What about you, Deirdre? Where did you like kind of like what area, or like, you know, did you fish before you met Derek? Or
no? So funny enough, growing up in the valley, like hiking, camping, cycling, swimming, gardening, all of that stuff, but I never went fishing once. Just no one in the family, I guess, did it. Had lobster fishermen in the family, but no recreational fishers. Okay. But we went up to, like, I bet it was Liscombe in the woods, and we did some fishing first. He had a fly rod, and I had a spinning rod that he had set up for me. And so my first fish was on a spinning rod. And then quickly I could see what he was doing with the fly rod, and I wanted to learn. And then the next fish I had hooked was on my own mayfly. So both brook trout.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah. What would you guys say is your like favorite fish to target, if you could choose? Because I know like both you have fished all over the place. Tim, like you've done crazy shoots all over the place, caught crazy fish. And I know Deirdre, you were just out in BC not long ago for steelhead and stuff. So what would you say is like if you could pick one fish to target the rest of your life, what would it be?
It would be brook trout, hands down. That's where I started, and that's where I'll end. I really feel that way. Like especially after living away from the East Coast for almost 10 years. All I wanted to do when I lived away from here was come back here and fish for brook trout. So
Wow. Yeah. Even after all the crazy things you've got, like rooster fish, peacock bass, all that stuff. Brook
those
trout.
are awesome, and I'd go do them again in a second.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but if I had to pick one place to fish and one fish to fish for the rest of my life, it would be here at brook trout.
Yeah. What about you, Deirdre?
It's tough. I mean, brook trout are beautiful, and you get away from everyone typically when you're seeking them. You're in the middle of the woods in a little stream somewhere. So I enjoy that for the solitude and the tranquility. But I have to say Atlantic salmon, just because I feel lucky as a fairly newer angler to have hooked into as many salmon as I have in the past 5 years, but also the community and the culture surrounding it,
Absolutely.
the historical value, the heritage. I love all of that. It's very rich in story, and that's something that's meaningful to me.
Yeah.
Their fight is like no other, right? So
I mean, when you hook an Atlantic salmon, you kind of know what it's all about. I think it took me about 5 tries, and I hooked my first one in North River in Cape Breton with a good friend of mine, Dane, and I actually had burned 3 fish prior to that, and I was still a newbie and I didn't know what was going on, and he checked my hook and it was actually broken off. I thought he was going to drown me. I did. But after I hooked my first one, I realized, like, okay, this is what all the walking and all the time and effort and the hours of casting and the sore shoulders is all about, because like the power is just insane and the acrobats. So yeah, I totally get where you're coming from there.
What's your favorite, Szeto?
If I had to pick one, man.
Sorry to turn it around.
No, that's fine. No, it's give and take here. Man, I don't know. Like, I grew up fishing the Bredor Lakes for brown trout, like right out of the salt in the Bredor Lakes. I think if I had to do that, but it would have to be the Bredor Lakes. It would have to be the Bredor Lakes. Otherwise, I'll have to go with probably brook trout as well. But yeah, just there's something about catching them right out of the salt like that. You know, it's different in a river. I still like that. Don't get me wrong. But it's just what I grew up, and you know, I still think about it. I'm kind of upset. I was planning on getting down there this year. It doesn't look like it's going to happen. You know, we had the late start to the season and everything, but I think brown trout, but it would have to be in the Bredor Lakes. Yeah. So let's talk a bit about flow. So I'm excited for this. I mean, I've been fortunate to be a part of the little film we did there, Tim, Invasive. If you haven't seen that, you can check it out. It's on YouTube now. You can just YouTube like Invasive chain pickerel Nova Scotia. It should pop up. Mm-hmm. So I've seen your work, and like when I first saw like the finished product, I was amazed. And, you know, everyone that I showed it to was like, "That's awesome." So I'm really excited to see what you guys put together. So tell me a little bit about it. Kind of like, what are we to expect? Kind of what is like the aim of flow? Like, what is kind of like the story behind it? I don't know who wants to start. If anyone wants to, you want to start, Deirdre? Chime in on. Okay.
So Tim and I met last year on the Restigouche at Glen Eden, and we were there with Serge Collin. He's an angler and he works for Tourism New Brunswick, sport fishing and hunting. And you had known him for quite some time, I believe, Tim.
I had known him but never met him.
Okay. Yeah. So it was my first time meeting both of them. And as you do, you're talking about how you get into the sport and how you fell in love with angling. And the community is such a huge part of it. And all the beautiful stories of people that you meet on the river that are so supportive and kind, and they become almost like family, as you guys well know. And so I said how it would be so neat to do a book, perhaps, of characters of the maritime rivers that are the lesser known stories of these people, because they're not on social media and they've seen the rivers, 50 some years ago and what they once were. And it's just a lot of really rich and meaningful stories that they can share and teach us that aren't readily available unless you're out on the river and connect with them in person during the season. And so as we started talking about that, the three of us on the porch at Glen Eden at night, we kind of drummed up this idea of doing a web series to tell those stories.
Cool. So what kind of stories can we get like a sneak peek? What kind of, maybe give me like a story that we should expect to hear about?
Well, I think there's a lot of river systems in the Maritimes that are we know them very well, but they're not known to a lot of people outside of the provinces. And especially in Nova Scotia with the Marguerite and then the St. Mary's River. And they're beautiful fisheries that we have accessible to us. And the fish are really, they're epic. They're epic fishery that we have. And so just to showcase those unique ecosystems and the people that have grown up and their first, second, third, fourth generation anglers and their various stories and what they have to teach us. But it'll be a lot of history and a lot of experienced anglers sharing their stories that we may not necessarily get to see day to day, because they're people that are just out on the river 24/7. They're not taking photos and posting them on Instagram.
For me, this has always been kind of in the background. Like I've had the opportunity to travel so many places and do shows on so many things, but I've never been able to concentrate on my home province. So for me, I'm excited to tell all these stories of my home province that I wanted to tell, on top of all the stories that Deirdre's brought to the table, and make this show, you know, what should have been done a long time ago.
Cool. Yeah, well, I can't wait for it. It's going to be awesome. And like I said, I've seen your work, and I mean, we have beautiful rivers here. You know, and you mentioned Marguerite, beautiful river. I can't hook a fish out of it, but that's just me. I'm cursed on that river, but I love fishing it. It's awesome. Tell me a little bit about, like you were talking about Glen Eden. What's that river system like? I've never been there. I'd like to someday. How can you compare like maybe those rivers to like Nova Scotia?
Dude,
just...
my first reaction honestly was the fishing salmon out of, is it Shark Canoe? Shark Canoes was a totally different experience than I've had, and I've done, you know, Gaspé and Nova Scotia and Newfoundland and Iceland, and never fished for salmon out of a canoe, where you're basically starting at the back of the pool and going to the head and anchoring and drifting and swinging. It was a unique way to fish salmon, for sure.
Yeah.
I like I said, I've never done it anywhere else. So it was kind of one of those situations where you're like, no, you go first, and you watch the guy who's done it before, because you're like, this is new. This is really new, right?
Yeah.
Fish salmon, but I'm not going first.
Yeah, I noticed that, like how you guys were fishing out of canoes. When I saw the photos, I was like, oh, they're fishing out of canoes. Like, that's crazy. I would love to do that. I don't know if that's something we could do around here. I don't know. Like, I think the bodies of water are a little bit smaller, because they're pretty big, wide rivers, right?
Very large. And I think that's the reason, like, they take you to where the typical holding spots are going to be.
Right.
And you're fishing. So if you start, you're having a very short line on, say, the left first, and then you do the same length of line to the right and let it swing around. And when it's fully done its swing, just like you would if you were standing waiting casting, you pick up, let out a little bit more, and you essentially fish until your casting capacity has been reached. And then they lower that boat down to, they call them fishing drops. And so they go to the next drop, which is just a few feet down, and you're covering all of the water that way. And hopefully it's the most efficient way, and it's hopefully the most successful way to hook into any fish that are coming through or that are holding in that pool.
Cool. Yeah, no, I definitely want to try it out. It looks so awesome. There's so many places on my bucket list. I think after seeing those and those photos and hearing you guys talk about it, definitely a place I want to try out. What if you guys were to say, like, if you guys were to tell me your most memorable catch, like a fish that really sticks out in your mind, what would it be? Tim, you want to go first? Because you've had, like, I don't know,
Sure.
I'm gonna give you the hard one, because you've caught all kinds of different species.
Like,
so
I feel like there's so many subcategories to that question. Man, that's a really difficult one. For me, it would probably be roosterfish, only because it was on my bucket list for so long before I got it. So I got my roosterfish in Costa Rica, and it was, you know, it had been on my bucket list since I started fishing, because you see for me, I'd see pictures of rooster fish in magazines, and like you're flipping through, and it's like, what is that when you see it the first time? Especially like, the shots in Baja, the guys getting them from the beach and stuff like that. Like it was just one of those, I need to get one of those fish kind of thing. So crossing that off the list was a big one. Although I don't even feel like I cross it off the list. I go right back and do it again.
Yeah, no, I mean they're totally cool looking. If any of you out there don't know what a rooster fish is, you guys should Google it or YouTube it, because they're an awesome looking fish, and it looks like they're very, like, they hit really hard and stuff from what I see.
Yeah,
And
they
just
fight
like
really
big
well.
runs, hard fighters. Yeah, they look pretty crazy. Deirdre, what about you?
That's tough. I mean, that trip in November with Epic Waters Angling to Frontier Steelhead in BC, that was absolutely incredible. A lot of steelhead were hooked into, landed about half, like similar to salmon, like the landing ratios. But yeah, probably a dozen fish that I had landed with the guides there, and they were incredible, super powerful. Like you hook into a fish, and as you realize that you've hooked into one, now you're in your backing all of a sudden. Like it's just, they're gone. So those were incredibly powerful and just an amazing experience. But for a favorite fish, I would have to say fishing with Robert Chaisson on the Marguerite and our friend Raymond Ford. They quickly became very good friends of ours while salmon angling. And we had all been together, and it was just like the fishing was tough. And we get to a pool in Cape Breton where you could actually see the fish. And so there's about half a dozen fish there. Every fly we put over that group of fish, not one of them took it. So we tried all the traditional salmon patterns. And Ray actually suggested, he said, well, does anyone have any like weightless trout flies, like a very small pattern? So we tried, like, I think it was a size, I can't recall exactly what it was, but a super tiny weightless nymph. It was just brown yarn essentially on a little trout hook. And this beautiful fall colored girls took that fly, and it was an amazing fight. But it was just the community of it, and we had tried so hard to get a fish that weekend, and we were rewarded with our efforts. So
Yeah, I think for me it was definitely that first salmon in North River where I kind of realized, like, this is something I can get into, because I was feeling kind of defeated. Like, and when I remember we even contemplated going, and the water was kind of low, and I was like, oh, water's low. Like, I didn't catch fish in prime water. Like, I'm probably not going to catch fish in low water. So we went, and I finally got that fish, and it was just kind of like, yeah, I need to do this a lot more. I need to get better gear. I need to get a new rod. I need to start investing in this type of sport fishing. So for me, yeah, definitely salmon. But I mean, I haven't really caught as many different species as you guys, so maybe in a few years that'll change. I don't know, but that was pretty memorable for me. So Deirdre, I wanted to ask you something. I think, like, you're probably one of the more knowledgeable female anglers I know, and I've talked to other female anglers, and they kind of talk about certain, like, challenges that have come up. Because I mean, when you're talking sport fishing, it's predominantly male in the sport, and they kind of express some challenges that they face. So I just thought maybe I'd ask you, like, have you ever had any kind of challenges as a female angler, or is it pretty smooth sailing for you? Like, is there anything that you could kind of speak to?
sure. I think a lot of the challenges I've created myself with feeling intimidated as a new angler back in 2015-ish. I would be really nervous going to a new pool if I hadn't fished that pool before, and I kind of get in my own head about it. But then as soon as I would go onto the river and there were other anglers there, they were extremely welcoming. And it was almost more of an advantage, because a new guy that walked up didn't get given an extra fly or given, a pointer as to where the fish were holding or who had hooked a fish that morning. They just were kind of left on their own. Not always, but for myself, I always seem to be taken under someone's wing and, like, come out and I'll show you exactly where and what to do. So it was extremely helpful as a learning opportunity. So I would say, as a woman out there that wants to get into it, like, soak up all the different teaching and learning opportunities that you can, because there's going to be a ton when you meet different anglers on the river. and really it's really more of an advantage than it is a detriment to you being a minority out there.
Mm-hmm. If maybe let's like, it sounds like you've been pretty fortunate. People kind of took you under your wing. Have you ever had any negative kind of experiences at all? And if you did, like, what would you say to other female anglers starting up in the sport, like how you would kind of handle those situations?
Sure. So in the Maritimes, we do have there's an old boys club to some degree with a certain pockets in different river systems. So sometimes when you're new to an area and then add in the fact that you're a female, you might get a couple, choice words or something being said when you walk up that you wouldn't expect to receive. But I think if you can just let that roll off of you, I know, for instance, in Cape Breton, I was fishing once with Derek, and there's kind of a disrespectful terminology that was thrown around by one of the anglers there. But no one had hooked a fish that morning. There was about a dozen anglers out. Half of them were over on this pool and half of them over here. And we just kind of walked to another area that was in eyesight of them, and just kind of ignored that comment, and I just let it roll off me. It made me a little bit irritated, but that was fine. And no one had caught a fish all morning, and it was now like probably 11:30 maybe. And I hooked into a fresh 12-pound fish that jumped 5 times on my own term. So your level of experience or your sex does not make any difference to that fish. And so if you can show them what you can do, it pays off. I think that was the best response to give somebody like that.
Absolutely. I hope they saw it. Did they?
They did. Yep.
Perfect. Yeah, no, just what you said about like the level of experience I think for any angler, it always seems like beginner's luck. Like a lot of times they'll just kind of step onto a river or something, and it seems like they always just hook the fish that you've been after for a while. It's happened to me a couple of times. My brother does it to me every time we fish together. So, yeah, he's lucky. I know you're watching there, Ryan. It's all luck, it.
They're just fishy people.
Yeah, that's it. But yeah, I'm happy that most people are pretty helpful, and I think in general, like the community here in Nova Scotia they're pretty helpful. Everyone's kind of helpful with one another, and likes to share tips and strategies. Maybe not give out your secret spots. No one really does that, but I think it's good that we're all open, whether you spin fish, fly fish with simply just with like a worm and bobber. It's all fishing. I think that I think we have a pretty good community here, and just by looking at like some of the the like fishing groups on Facebook, let's say, there's always tons of comments when someone posts a question. So, and it's generally pretty helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Generally pretty helpful. So I think that's important. So I got a comment here from Craig. He says, I know Tim had a part in Invasive. Wouldn't mind hearing more about the production of that.
Invasive was, it kind of just happened, didn't it?
It did kind of just happen, yeah.
Yeah.
It was fun, though. I enjoyed it. It was really good.
Basically started as Szeto kept telling me about chain pickerel and how awesome they were, and they were a fish that took top water and had big teeth and sounded like fun. So it started off really innocent. I was like, okay, let's just go fishing. And then it was just so cool, and has this huge story behind it in the province that it was a bit of a no-brainer, because nobody else was really telling that story other than the news outlets.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish we could have spent an hour on it. I wish you could easily do a full hour on it.
Mm-hmm.
But kind of scaling it down to an overview was difficult, because I didn't want it to be an overview. But I'm really happy with how it turned out, but it did start completely innocent.
Yeah.
Turned into this thing, and it kind of got bigger and smaller and bigger over the course of a year.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the message was good behind it too, that, I mean, I think fish like targeting pickerel is pretty cool. Like there's no species really that's going to offer you those type of takes, and coming at a heavy cover like that, you're not going to find it with another species here. But on the same token, like I said, in invasive, it's kind of a love-hate. Like I don't like that they're spreading across province. I don't think anybody does. Well, I shouldn't say anybody, but most people don't, especially when you've grown up fishing trout, your whole life. But when it's like, heat wave in the summertime, and I live on a lake that's full of them. Well, why not hop down on the boat for a couple hours as the sun's coming up, and they're just aggressive, and they're good eating. Why not go out and take some home, take advantage? There's all kinds of them there.
I do kind of feel like it's a making lemonade out of lemons kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, no, like it's like you said in invasive, like, it was danced around a few times. Like if we could get rid of them and make them all go away, we would, but we can't. And we're fishermen, and they're fun.
Yeah.
And they taste delicious.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things in the positive column as far as I'm concerned for chain pickerel, once you rule out that they're invasive species, right?
Yeah.
And like you said, in the middle of summer when water's low everywhere else and you're not going trout fishing, it's a great alternative. Like to get up at 4 a.m. and hit the lake in the fog and hit those topwater feeds. It's a fun day. If you like fishing, you'll like chain pickerel fishing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, like I really only ever spin fished for them. I even though I fly fished for quite a while now, maybe 8-10 years, it's just like in the last 2 years, I really started fly fishing for them because it's always, like I said, I'm always target them in like heavy cover. It's really hard to do without the fly, but then I kind of figured out a couple flies. Like you got fly with a weed guard, and if you kind of hit the edges and pockets, you can still pull out some pretty good ones. And, like just the way they come out and just, will hit a bait, like charge 20 feet. Like you can watch the weeds kind of separate. It's really exciting, So it is making, lemonade out of lemons for sure. And I mean, I don't even really target them till summertime. Like I haven't been in the lake in over a month now, and I don't really plan to until all the good like trout and stripers and all that stuff is done. When it's the heat of the summer and the rivers are dried up, and I'll get out there. But
did you start eating them right away when you started catching them, or was that something that kind of came after?
It was pretty soon after. I think for the first little while, because my dad was in Ontario before he moved to Nova Scotia, and he used to talk about pike a lot. And I caught pike before pickerel, because I really didn't even catch a pickerel until I came here for university, right? Didn't even really know what they looked like, but I knew they were similar to a pike. And my dad always said, "No, pike's no good. It's too bony. Don't bother." So then after a while, it's just kind of like, there's got to be a way to eat these things. And then I just kind of got on YouTube and I saw like how to take the bones out. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And tried it. I was like, man, these are delicious. Like I like these better than trout. I like them better than bass. So then I just kind of started doing it. And now it's like, I'm kind of, rather than just doing like your regular beer batter or fish fry, I like trying to incorporate it into different recipes. And why not? There's so many. Like you're not going to hurt. They shouldn't be here anyway. So take them out. And I mean, rather than just take them and like you throw them in the woods, which is illegal by the way, or use them for fertilizer, do whatever. They're awesome to eat. And I mean, I think people are intimidated by the bones, but yeah, it took me a few tries, and it's really not that hard afterwards. Once you kind of figure it out. Got a couple questions coming in here. I missed one. When Sean says, when fishing for rainbow, do you find smaller hook or larger hook is better for landing them? What do you guys think for like flies on that? Like I kind of know like for spin fishing and ways I've fished them in the past. You got into big steelhead, which is basically a rainbow that goes to the ocean in BC. What did you find, Deirdre? Like, were they using bigger hooks, smaller hooks? Like, what was kind of like, what did they use?
Smaller is usually with like a bit of a bat sometimes, but a smaller hook would be, to me, like less leverage for that fish, and it fits the hook.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think the same. Like when we used to fish in the Bredor Lakes, before I really got into fly fishing for them, it was very small hooks. I don't even know what size it would be, like a size maybe 8-6, no, maybe like 8-10 even, because we would use the little shrimp. We called them crawdads, but they're little grass shrimp. So you kind of have to have a small hook anyway.
Mhm.
But I found most times like those small hooks would bury right in the corner of the mouth and like it would really stick. I was really surprised when my buddy showed me the hooks. I was like, there's no way you're keeping a big fish on that small hook, but like it would bury right in there.
Yeah.
And like I'm like 4 or 5 pound brown trout, rainbow trout, and that little hook would bury right in there. And I think that it might have some like the leverage. Now thinking back, it's definitely, when they're like rainbows like to jump normally. Whenever I've hooked them, they jump, and that leverage is just enough to kind of pop that hook out. So I would go with smaller hook. I think Deirdre, you're smaller hook. I don't know, Tim, do you have any experience with?
I don't have a ton of experience with rainbows. No.
Okay.
Yeah,
funny. We were just talking about pickerel, and Keith here reminded me that the record Nova Scotia record speckled trout actually came out of Blackett's Lake, and that's actually full of pickerel now. I think that was 19. It was long to 40s, 47. I want to say. I don't know, Keith, if you want to comment there and remind me. I think it was like 1947 at a Blackett's Lake, but now full of pickerel, unfortunately.
Yeah.
You guys ever seen how big? I can't remember how big that fish was, but it was big. What's the biggest trout you guys have ever seen? Because I know, like, Deirdre, you're down St. Mary's Way, and you fished different places. Like, I know there's big fish in the province. I haven't seen many like huge ones, but like, what's the biggest like trout you've seen?
Like a resident brook trout, like 4 pounds, like not a sea run, like a resident brook
Yeah.
trout. That's rare. Like that's not an everyday occurrence.
No.
No.
No. Wow. You're not going to tell anyone where that spot was, I take it.
No.
Good. All right. You should keep it that way. If there's 4 pound resident trout in there, definitely. Tim, what about you for Nova Scotia?
Biggest brook trout I've ever seen in Nova Scotia?
Mm-hmm.
Man, that's a tough one. Definitely not 4, probably pushing 3 though. 3.5. And I'm not gonna say where.
No, that's fine. I'm not gonna. I wouldn't say where either.
No.
No, I've caught some in the Bredor Lakes, but I'll say Bredor Lakes because it's huge. Go try to find it.
Wait for your DMs tonight, Tim.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's
shutting my phone off.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think my brother got the biggest one I've seen, of course. Right? I was saying that how he's a lucky fisherman. Anyway, I think it was about 19 inches. It was a sea trout though, but just big fat one. Of course, I fished for years and years and years for fish like that, and he literally walked down and within 2 casts, 5 minutes, right away. Unbelievable. I know you're listening there. Craig has another question here, or he starts with a comment, then a question. It says also he's pretty interested in salmon fly fishing. He's never tried it, and he imagines it's much different than spin fishing, and it definitely is. Any tips for a starter? I still feel like I'm a starter. Like I've been doing it for a couple of years, but I still don't feel like I have it really locked down. I'm sure you guys probably have more experience fishing salmon. I think if I was to give any advice, it would be kind of take your time. Maybe don't get in the water if you don't have to. A lot of people, first thing they walk right in the water, they try to get out so they can hit the other bank. But a lot of times, like the salmon are kind of right in front of you. So if you don't have to get in the water, if the water's not high, don't get in the water. Don't get in the water. That would kind of be like my one tip. Having a like quality line is pretty good too, to get a nice cast out there and get a nice swing. I started out with one type of line, and then I upgraded, and I was like, wow, is it ever different? And the swing was a lot nicer. And I did kind of find like my hookup ratio got a little bit better too. So that would be kind of like my advice, but I know you guys probably have
I think the line is a great one to mention, only because, I've tried steelhead and salmon line. Like a lot of the time lines are grouped together as steelhead and salmon. And I don't feel like it counts Atlantic salmon in that combo. I think it's a lot of Pacific salmon design lines, and I think a lot of people end up going out and buying them thinking it says steelhead and salmon, and they're made for way bigger water than what we end up fishing here. I mean, we do have big water that we fish here, but for me, I end up making way more short casts than I do long casts.
Yeah.
So I don't need a line that I can throw far. I need a line that I can control short.
Yeah. 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 I think that's a good point. That kind of makes me think, like, I think try not to overdo it, because I think, like, you need that nice presentation. You need the line to kind of fall nice. You need that nice swing. If you're trying too much and you kind of botch your cast and all your line just kind of flops on the water or slaps the water, we say, then that's not really good either. Deirdre, any
I agree.
advice for us?
Yeah, I agree with both of you with the line. Like, you don't need to have a huge cast to hook up with an Atlantic salmon by any means. A lot of times it is on a short cast. But I think a lot of people don't, and I was guilty of this in the beginning as well, they don't let it swing long enough. So they're picking up before that swing has been completed. And even leaving it on the dangle, and even taking your line and just kind of giving it a little bit of an action and at that very end of the dangle, because a fish could have been following that the whole way, and then you just strip it in real fast and cast it, and you missed that take. So taking the time, even though there is you're rotating through a pool and you want to make sure that you're doing it in a timely fashion, but just giving it that last swing a little bit extra time is going to increase your chances for a hookup dramatically, in my opinion.
No, that's actually something I don't do. Like, as you're saying that, I'm like, I'm one of the people she is talking about, how I just rip it out of the water. Like, but now that I think back, like, a lot of the fish I've hooked have been just kind of like, I'm ready to strip it back in and recast, and that's when it kind of tightens up. So you find you have a lot of success when it's like at the end of its swing, and you just kind of a little tiny motion.
Yeah, and you might like either kind of move it slightly, or you might just have your rod in your hand and just do that with your line.
Okay.
And that little bit of action at the end. If that fish had been following it the whole way, you let it come to a complete swing, and then just before you start to retrieve, it could be ready to take it. So give it that little bit of action and then pick it up. But that's a lesson that I've learned from far more experienced anglers than myself. And then the other thing that I think is important is if you have some flies that you find successful, have those flies in multiple sizes in your box, because if you move a fish on those flies, that same pattern, if it's not coming back and it's not taking, the amount of times that I've switched to a size down, I've gone down a size, then I've hooked up with that fish.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Or up. It depends on the season and the water levels. And all. But.
Yep. What fly? One fly in the box. If someone's like, I'm going to take all your flies but one, you can keep one, what fly would it be?
To fish for everything?
Let's do salmon and then an all-purpose fly.
Okay.
Let's do salmon since we're on the topic of salmon.
All right.
Kind of the rat series, like rescue rats, blue rats, silver rats.
Oh, okay. I don't think I've ever thrown that fly. I have one in my box. I don't think it's ever seen the water, but that I've taken note of that. It's going to be, yeah. What are you, Tim?
I'm gonna steal half of your answer and say blue charm, and it's not because I've caught a lot of fish on blue charm. They just jump out at me every time I open my fly box for some reason. And I'm gonna split mine between blue charm and marabou. Yeah,
marabous are good. Marabous are good, but blue charm, it's still, I've hooked probably 80% of my fish on blue charms, and all through like summer, fall. People think it's a summer. I don't know how many times I said, oh, your blue charm, that's a summer fly when I'm fishing in October. And like, I've already hooked a fish that day on it.
It's weird because like when I open up my fly box, that's the fly that I want to hook a fish on and rarely do.
Yeah. Okay. All-purpose fly. One fly to catch like everything. What would it be?
Anything with yellow in it. I'm a big fan of yellow, and I feel like trout and salmon both key into that. Multiple seasons, yeah.
Good.
Magog.
Magog, no.
I throw it all the time. I'd probably go there or variation thereof.
Okay. I'd have to probably go. I'm trying to think like all purpose here where I could catch
I know.
it. Probably a muddler, because a muddler can catch trout. I've caught a couple of nice trout already this
Actually, really
spring
good.
on muddler. Salmon takes muddler. I know smallies would. I think I don't know if there's a fish that wouldn't eat a muddler.
I think you win this round. That's a good call.
Yeah,
Mickey Finn, like those kind of things.
yeah, Mickey Finn actually.
Fish pattern.
Keith here in the comments mentioned Mickey Finn. That's I mean you can't mess with a Mickey Finn. Mickey Finn's great. Craig here says tell us more about the largest fish you've seen your brother catch. I guess that's for me. It's actually a really funny story. Do I have time to tell it? Okay, I'll try to be quick with it. It's pretty funny. I don't know if you've ever heard. You might have heard this story, Tim. I probably said it because it's hilarious, but it's probably actually. You know what? This is good because this is probably the craziest fishing story I have. And then maybe I'll get each one of you to share your craziest fishing story, and then maybe it'll be time to kind of end the show. So I already said my brother's like the luckiest fisherman ever. He really only fishes when I'm home with him. And every time we go out, he catches fish. It's just I just know he's going to catch one. Like the last time we fished last year in the Bredor Lakes, I didn't even have the fly rod set up yet, and he had like 3 hits already, 3 bobber downs already, before I could even get my line through. So anyway, he knew a guy with a really nice boat. We were going deep sea fishing. I think we were actually trying to target shark, but we ended up cod fishing. Anyway. He was scared to get seasick, and like I have gotten seasick before, so we got those seasickness patches and gave him one. I took one, and we kind of we're getting there, and he's kind of complaining about a headache, and I thought, he's just not used to getting up early. It's early for him, like the sun's just coming up, and so we get there, and he uses the washroom before we get in the boat, and he comes back. He's like, Matt, you got to come here. So I go and I look. He's like, look at my eyes, and one eye is completely dilated. And the other one is half dilated, and I'm rattled. I'm like, what happened? He's like, I don't know. I think I'm having a reaction to the patch. Anyway, we didn't know it at the time, but what happened basically was when he put the patch, you put it behind your ear, and then he put in his contacts without washing his hands. It was on his fingers, and we read the side effects, and that's what it can cause dilation in your eyes. So he was wrecked. So anyway, we're out on the boat, and like we even thought, we're like, do we call it off? He's like, no, I don't want to ruin anyone's trip. So we went out there, and because his eyes were dilated, he couldn't, like, it was like he said, it's like a lamp shining in your eyes constantly. So he had 2 pairs of sunglasses on, like a towel over his head, and he's just laying in this boat. And it's like a big boat, like one of those big ones you'd see down south. So like he was comfy, and he was like that for a couple hours. And fishing was kind of slow, a couple codfish here and there. And anyway, I kind of start to see him perk up after like 3 hours, and I said, you want to fish? You want to try to fish? He's like, yeah. He's like, give me a rod. So I just finished baiting a rod. So here. So I gave him the rod, and I went over to start baiting another rod, and I swear I didn't get the first piece of bait on. I fish on, and I look over. He's got this, like my striper pole. It was like a big, like a heavy action rod, and it's cracked right to the butt, and the line just starts screaming, like just going, not stopping. And I was like, that's not a cod. I don't know what he's got on here. I don't know if it's a shark, a tuna. I don't know. We're out 10 miles off Myra Gut in Cape Breton, 200 feet deep, and it's just running. And when I spooled up the reel, it was my first time spooling up a reel that big with braid, and I didn't compensate for the thin diameter, so I actually had to put 2 spools together, and I tied a blood knot. So I know there's 125 or 150 yards of braid, and I heard that knot go through the eye. So that's how far it ran. Ding, 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 right through all the things. So anyway, we fought it for like 20 minutes, and we get it close, and it would run. Get it close, run. Get it like halfway up the water column, down to the bottom. And to the point where, this fish was huge. I mean, like when normally when you're fishing, you got some give to the fish. This was like doing curls with like 50-pound dumbbells. So we had to take shifts in 5 minutes because you're literally putting everything you have just to get this fish to come up. And I didn't know, like, did he foul hook something? What is going on? And I could hear like the coating on the rod. What is it? They put that coating. It was just cracking. I could hear the rod cracking, creaking. Anyway, after about 20 minutes, you kind of see like a silhouette down there. And it turns out it was a huge halibut, like 80-pound halibut. We're out there for cod. he's got one eye this big and one eye this big, and he's just hooks. That's just him. Lucky. Anyway, we got it, and I think it was 80 pounds. I'm guessing. Like, he's holding it in a picture that I have, and it's up to his chest, down to his feet. This great big thing, and that was probably the craziest fishing story I've seen. That was the craziest fish I've ever seen. The craziest fish I've ever touched by far. And that's just him. He didn't touch a rod. He had the rod in his hand for 2 minutes, and that was it.
Wow.
So I don't know if I know, Tim, like, you fished all over the place. You probably have crazy ones. I don't know, Deirdre. Do you have a crazy? What's yours, Deirdre? Like, your crazy story, if you had to pick one.
Nothing in comparison to that, but I mean, when I was in BC, fishing with the guide there from Frontier, Joel Gorley, I think I had my first, I had a female steelhead that day, and then we had seen a couple of fish, and so it was my turn, and there was another guest there with me as well, but it was my turn, and I'm casting out, and he's telling me, like, it's such huge water, and it's freezing cold, and I'm basically up to the top of my waders, multiple layers on, 4 or 5 layers on the bottom, same on the top, and I'm on my tippy toes almost, just because it's so deep, but I want to get out to where I am, and I'm practicing spay casting, and he's like, okay, well, you need to get deeper, so cast upstream and let it swing, and as it's swinging, like, mend to get it down deeper and deeper and deeper, like those big fish, they're going to be down there. Anyway, sure enough, a fish takes my fly, and it just is gone, and like I said, the backing is just like just gone and into the backing already. And he's like, okay, we're going to have to, typically they'd want you to stay in spot and fight it there. He's like, we're going to have to follow this fish. So he goes ahead of me. And again, it's huge water. I'm not used to wading that deep and that much flow. Tippy toes, it's fine and safe, but I have this massive fish on. I think I'm going to gain on it. And I'm reeling. And then it's like, nope, gone again. And so he ends up taking, there's fallen trees as I'm coming, and I can't go around them. It'd be too deep. So he ends up clearing enough branches from these trees that I can go underneath them. And so I'm lifting my rod up and passing it to myself with my other hand and kind of limboing under these fallen trees to not get soaking wet, but to keep the fish on. And this was on for like maybe 15 minutes. And he's like, this has to be a male. It has to be a repeat spawner. And I'm like, this is going to be a fish of a lifetime. Like, I can't believe this. Anyways, but just like with salmon, you have a big fish on like that for a period of time, and there's a hole that gets bored with the barbless fly, and then all of a sudden it's just off. So I was up and under 2 or 3 different trees. We had it on. The fight was amazing. I'm getting it closer and closer, and just all of a sudden off.
No.
That story was like, you never know, but we know it was big, and we know it was incredible, and
Wow.
It was quite the celebration afterwards, just for the fact that you connected for a minute with that large fish.
Yeah, it's always a blessing when you hook into a large fish. I know it's like heartbreaking when you lose them, but just some people fish all their lives and never hook a fish like that. So just, and that's kind of the way I feel with salmon too. Like, anytime you even hook one, you're like, I'm blessed. Just to be able to hook that fish. Because I mean, we got a friend, Tim, who's fished for like 5-6 years before he hooked his first one. Yeah. And he's hooked a few now after that, but just when you get that first one.
Yeah.
That stuff. So what about you, Tim? You've fished all over the world now. What's your
I don't know. For a specific, I have so many little anecdotal stories. Man, that's a tough one. Like,
give us a few of them then. Pick your top 3.
One of the craziest places I've ever fished is definitely Seychelles. I've really never been anywhere like it. Like, you have fish swimming up to you on the flats to check you out because they don't know what you are. It was really like being in a fishing zoo. Like, you could fish. There was a guy on the trip who stayed up all night and fished GTs off the boat all night, and he'd be going to bed in the morning, and we'd be going out on the tenders to the flats, and he'd say, I got 7 fish. And just like the amount of things you saw on that trip that you'll never see again just from being there were mind blowing. You know what I mean? Like, hooking a tuna and having a barracuda bite it in half, or hooking a GT and having other GTs come in and try to knock the bait out of its mouth. Like, just a whole other level of fish behavior.
Mhm.
Like it was, I'll never forget that one. I mean, it was 15 years ago, and there's still people going to the same place, and it's still, you know, one of those destinations everybody wants to go. And believe me, man, I'll go back in a second.
Yeah. What about just to let everyone know, Tim was not recently, March. You were in Colombia. Was it March or February?
I was in Colombia in January.
January is what. Yeah, was that
that was a new one for me. Like I've shot in and fished in a lot of environments, but that was my first ever real jungle trip. And it's like, you know, you land in Bogota, Colombia, and you think it's going to be really hot there, and it's actually, the climate there is really nice. And then you get to the jungle, and it's exactly how you think it's going to be. It's awful. It's really awful, and you're basically like, so I'm going to have bugs on me, and I'm going to be drenched in my own sweat for the next however many days till I get out of here. But man, the fishing, like, it was unreal. Like, to catch bass that big, that fight that hard, and chase flies that large.
Yeah. Peacock bass he's talking about too.
On the Orinoco. And you know, I was lucky on that trip because I was in a boat with a spin guy, and what I realized, like, the first day after everybody got back to the camp, is the other boats that were two fly fishermen really didn't get that many fish, and I had like 12 the first day, and everybody else is coming back and being like, we got 4, we got 2. And it was because I was playing back up to the spin guy. Like, he was chucking stuff so far and drawing so many fish in close that I could then hit. It wasn't the plan, but that's basically what ended up happening. So, you know, the first 2 days of that trip, I absolutely cleaned up, but it's like so hot that you stand up there and throw a 12 weight for 10 minutes, and then you have to take a 10-minute break.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah. Nate asks, how were the Amazon bugs, Tim? Like, describe it.
Unreal.
What kind of bugs were they?
Like, unreal. At first, you're like, it's so hard to describe because you can't identify any of the bugs you see. You just see a whole bunch of bugs, and you don't know if they bite or sting or what they do, and they're around you all the time. And like, if you stick a fish and it bleeds at all, there's even more bugs. So you just kind of get used to there being giant bees and these just bugs all over you all the time. Like, it was laughable at points where somebody would be landing a fish and their whole arm would be just covered in bugs, or these big black bees that would land on the boat all the time. And you eventually get used to them because it's your everyday when you're there. You just don't get away from it. So there's no reprieve. So it's like, either I'm dealing with this or I'm gonna have a really crappy time here.
What's worse, Amazon bugs or Beaverbank black flies?
Beaverbank black flies.
They're pretty bad. Yeah, they're pretty bad. Oh my god. Yeah, so our time is almost up here. So I thought maybe you could tell us, just before we go, we talked about flow earlier. When should we expect to see like the first episode? Is that something that takes a while, or?
It's not. I mean, we did kind of have to push the season a bit because of the season delay. So obviously we were in a bit of a holding pattern until fishing season opened. But we're actually shooting the first episode this coming weekend, and it'll be available to view end of June, beginning of July. So it'll be turned around pretty quick, and it'll be a great introduction to Deirdre on the St. Mary's.
Perfect. What part of flow are you most looking forward to, Deirdre? Like, are you gonna? So you said the first one's St. Mary's. So like, what is that kind of episode? Because I know, like, you've got a little place on St. Mary's too. So that must be, meaningful to you to shoot there. So what is, like, something you're looking forward to in flow and, like, telling that story of the St. Mary's?
Well, to be quite honest, I mean, people see us on Instagram and we're out having these great fishing adventures, but the stories of the river systems and the risks that are present right now, and what we can do as anglers to help these fish that are within our rivers and preserve them so that they're around for all of our children and friends and family down the road. And so to showcase the efforts of those local river associations, to showcase what people have seen back in the day and versus today, I'm really excited to do that. And Derek has a rich connection to that river system, and so does the president of the St. Mary's River Association, Scott Beaver. So, and that's really how my story began, because of his love and passion for this sport. So to be able to showcase that to everyone, I'm really excited to share that.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, like I said, really excited for it. And I can't wait to see it. And I think that, you know, anyone who has seen like your guys' Instagram and stuff should be excited too. So in saying that, before we sign out here, where can we like see some of your stuff? Like what's, you know, if you maybe want to share like your Instagram, maybe that way, if, you know, people had maybe also if they had questions, they could reach out to you. Cause like maybe if someone had photography questions, Tim or something, they could ask you. And if they had, you know, questions for you, Deirdre, they could ask you as well. So Tim, where can we find you on Instagram?
I am at Tim D. Myers, Myers. I'll also just give a heads up that we will be launching an Instagram for Flow in the coming weeks. So check out both my and Deirdre's Instagram pages to direct you to that, because that'll be the hub for not only the Flow episodes, but also other Flow related photo content, other content coming out from the show.
Awesome. And Deirdre, where can we find you at on Instagram? How do we find you?
I'm at the Wading Wanderess on Instagram. And like Tim said, we're going to have another one coming out there for Flow. And yeah, anybody that's looking to get into fly fishing for the first time, I get a lot of DMs about that kind of stuff. So please don't hesitate, reach out, add me, and we'll chat fishing and hopefully see you guys on the river.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, for everyone that tuned in today, thank you. Same time next week, 9 o'clock. Tim, thank you. Deirdre, thank you. Can't wait to hook up with you guys and fish sometime soon. And for everyone else out there, thanks a lot. And we'll see you next week. Take care, everyone, in tight lines.
Thanks, buddy.